So the recent story, and I guess that you could consider this part of my market watch segment, but it's basic. It's on its own, because I didn't put it in with the last video I think that I posted. Stellantis' new CEO must decide which of the 14 brands stay or go. It says Carlos Tavares departed due to disagreements over strategy, but what is the right strategy for the struggling Stellantis group? Stellantis is searching for a new CEO after the departure of Carlos Tavares last December. The struggling group has 14 brands, and not all of them will necessarily survive in the new era. Stellantis profits dropped by 48% in H1 2024. It reveals full 2024 data later this week. So this story was published February 24th. They have since found a new CEO. And if you look 13 hours ago, Yahoo Finance, they have this new CEO. And it says, is a new CEO reason enough to buy a Stellantis turnaround? So now they found a new CEO. Stellantis has faced adversity and its stock is down 56% over the past year. Newly appointed CEO Antonio Filosa has to mend relationships with dealers and suppliers. Stellantis is often pegged as the most vulnerable to tariffs of the Detroit Big Three. Shares of Stellantis have been consistent. Unfortunately, over the past year, the shares have consistently declined, shedding roughly 56% of their value. The automaker's former CEO, Carlos Tavares, was clashing with the board of directors, and dealers were frustrated and struggling to move inventory. The United Auto Workers Union carried out a public campaign to have Tavares fired, and he soon resigned. With freshly anointed CEO Antonio Filosa taking over, it is time for investors to jump in and scoop up shares on the cheap. Is it time for you to do that? Repairs required. By the time former CEO Tavares resigned, Stellantis' relationship with its dealer suppliers and unionized employees had been severely strained, something Filosa will have to mend. Let's take a closer look at the challenge with dealers. So it goes on and on and on and on and talks about this. It says they also had legal battles regarding pricing, among other issues, marking another entity Filosa will have to mend relationships with. And then they show the Grand Cherokee 4xe plug-in hybrid. Time to cut fat. Another gift left for Filosa to navigate will be choosing brands to pour capital into now. When Stellantis formed in 2021, Tavares announced that each brand would have a 10-year window to execute business plans, but later walked that back by saying performance could be reviewed as early as 2026. You have to rip the Band-Aid off and pick and choose which of your brands are going to survive. Tavares giving them 10 years basically pushed the decision down the road to his successor because there was no way he was going to be around. No, but see, they thought everything changed ultimately because of the elections in the United States of America. And Donald Trump's election, before he was elected, the belief was that we were going completely electric. The belief was that all cars would be forced to be electric. The belief was that everything was moving in that direction. What they didn't count on was the fact that Donald Trump was going to win. But when Donald Trump won, everybody was hooping and hollering, oh, yeah, Donald Trump's coming. He's going to destroy the EPA. He's going to bring the V8s back. The V8 engine's going to come back. Yay, we're going to have HEMIS again, blah, blah, blah. What they didn't count on was the fact that this asshole was going to say, yeah, I'm going to impose tariffs on the entire world. He didn't count on that. One of Stellantis' biggest problems is that even though there were a lot of American Dodge Mopar enthusiasts who were saying, yeah, that Carlos Tavares should sell the brands since he was basically going to run them into the ground. The simple fact of the matter is, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, those brands have been passed around like a cheap hooker since at least 2008's bailout. But even before that, they were purchased by Mercedes. They called it a merger of equally inferior products at the time. Mercedes reliability and Mercedes build quality have gone up considerably since then. But the more important thing is Mercedes customer service has also gone up. Stellantis has not. So I'm listening to a lot of these YouTubers and they're talking about the good old days when they, oh yeah, well we had the Hemi and we had the Hellcat and we don't want the six pack. And see, what they don't seem to understand is simply from a logistical point of view. The reality is it wasn't the Hellcat cars and it wasn't the Hemi cars that were really driving all of the sales. It was the V6 cars. And unfortunately, that's what it is. It's because the V6 cars were the cheapest. The SXT, then followed by maybe not so much the GT models. The Scat Packs did start to make some serious money, but the thing about it is that happened later after they became a little bit more popular. But the other important thing to understand is not only did the V6 models drive the sales simply from a logistical point of view, but the other issue is interest rates were lower. We are right now in 2025. Interest rates are high as fuck. People's credit, in many cases, has been strained by people making really bad financing decisions, or in some cases, people having issues with their rent and housing. So this is not the same as like 2018 or 2019. This is not the same when we had, 4.75% interest and then move into like the COVID era and we had, 3% interest or less. They were damn near doing 0% interest when they were trying to move those cars off the lots. But what happened? Look what they did. Stellantis allowed their dealers to mark the prices up on these cars. So my thing is, even if they bring back the Hemi, what difference is that going to make? They have Hemi cars right now sitting on lots, and they're not being sold. They've had Hellcats sitting on lots. They got TRXs sitting on lots, and they're not being sold. So the other issue that they have is that those bodies and those platforms are old. So here you got to deal with this new situation. You got to build all new platforms, all new bodies, because that STLA platform that they ran for the Dodge Charger EV has been canceled. In fact, it got canceled a hell of a lot faster than I thought it was going to get canceled. I actually thought that Stellantis might try to stand behind it and try to improve it and try to fix the bugs. They didn't even bother. They said, yeah, let's just dump it. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it wasn't. We're not going to know for a long time. But just bringing back the V8 engines, that's not going to do it. The times have changed, and the times have changed rapidly. Interest rates are higher. Insurance premiums on these vehicles are higher. On top of that, you got to worry about people not wanting to deal with a brand that is promising you car theft, where people are stealing your car. People, these pathetic parasites who will never be able to afford any of this shit because they have no jobs. They'll never have a job worthwhile that will pay them enough money to buy one of these cars. These pathetic parasites breaking into these dealerships, hijacking shipments, carjacking people. The simple fact is, you're dealing with a situation where times have just changed. And I'm listening to these people, oh, yeah, well, we're going to get the Hemi back. We're going to get the Hemi. Very few people will really be able to even afford to buy those things at the interest rates that are being promised, basically. Those dealerships will have no choice but to put, a very aggressive lease deal or a very aggressive finance deal. And that's assuming that the V8s really make it back into the cars. Chrysler itself, as a brand, is basically dead. And it's sad because Chrysler had the original Pacifica, which was basically the beginning of the crossover market, the original Pacifica. Then they also had, the Chrysler 300, of course. They brought out that Chrysler 200. They made it too small. That was a stupid move. And that car was discontinued. Alongside, they also had the Dodge Dart on the Dodge side. The Dodge Dart was discontinued. They had a stupid release. They released it stupidly. They never gave it an SRT variant. They dropped SRT as a brand name. So the simple fact is, times have changed. What do they really have now? And in my opinion, and I've owned several of those cars, in my opinion, they don't have anything left. They really have nothing to sell. Ram and Jeep will be okay. Chrysler as a brand is dead. Dodge is about to follow it, simply because they have nothing left to sell. They got rid of the Charger and the Challenger in order to bring back this electric Charger. They seem like they're about to scrap their ideas to make those Hurricane engines because they know that those cars don't sound like what people want them to sound like, no matter how powerful it is. One thing you got to deal with this industry, specifically with these enthusiasts. First of all, the price is going to be too high because you've got a brand new platform, you got a brand new engine. Price, they're trying to, get back all that money. But now you had a product that you basically had to cancel early and you didn't even get the real sales off of it that you wanted to get. So whatever they bring out next, they may surprise me, but I really don't think that the new products are going to be anything like what you expect or what you wanted out of them. The simple fact is, I think these Europeans who are in charge, I think that even though the Jeep and I don't even think, honestly, I don't think the Jeeps are going to get the V8. I really don't think so. I think maybe the Wagoneer might get it. I think the Wagoneer product may get it, but I really think that it'll probably only be Ram. Chrysler, as I said, is dead. They teased us. They said they were going to have an electric car to market, the Airflow. They didn't do it. They said that, we're going to have the Halcyon concept, and they showed this fucking BMW i8 looking sports car, and it was like, wait a minute, y'all are never going to be able to build that. In fact, right now you're in danger of the windows and doors being shuttered on Chrysler altogether, and y'all showing me something that looks like a BMW i8 with more glass. It's like you're never going to be able to build that. They have nothing to offer. The Dodge product, again, I also believe the Dodge product, in addition to the fact that most of these people aren't going to be able to afford the product because of the interest rates and because of the insurance, because you got to remember, insurance premiums kill a lot of these deals. I also think that the other big issue that they're going to have is that the market, that the audience that they were marketing to, I think that audience has, to some extent, maybe matured a little bit. And they've started to prioritize differently. I think a lot of them are going to end up going to Infiniti. I think a lot of them are going to end up going to BMW and Mercedes. And the reality is, those that can't follow, I think a lot of those people are going to end up in Kias. A lot of those people are going to end up in Hyundais, Hondas, and Toyotas. Because let's face it, a lot of them have shitty credit. Let's just face it. I can speak because I got 850 credit score, so I can just say it. A lot of these people got shit credit. They're not going to be able to easily afford to buy one of these cars when they're marked up ridiculously. And then on top of that, now you got to pay for insurance. Insurance is a deal killer. And now you're trying to buy a car where the car theft rate is high and the insurance premiums are going to be consequentially higher. It's like, guys, I really think they're in serious trouble. Carlos Tavares has dug a ditch for them. I don't think they're coming out of it. This guy, Antonio Filosa, which again is he's a European. If you're going to have him at the top, they're going to be focused on making back all the money that they lost within the last 3 years. And they're also going to be focused on going forward. They're going to want platforms and cars that they can sell globally. They're going to be focused on efficiency. And it's sad because when you focus on efficiency, that's the worst thing you can do, when you're talking about enthusiast vehicles. That's what the twin-turbo Hurricane 6 was all about. It was about efficiency. Oh, yeah, well, we get better gas. We get 2 miles per gallon better than a Hemi, and we got 510 horsepower instead of 485. The reality is what you're dealing with is egotistical buyers. They want to make as much noise as they can. They want to be as loud as they can. And that's the reason why they go out and put these shitty fart cans on these stupid mufflers for these garbage Subarus and these stupid Toyotas. I was in the traffic a little while ago. I had an Infiniti. It was an old G36 next to me, and it had a fart can muffler on it. You got to hear that shit. So I rolled up my window so I couldn't hear him because this car is very, very quiet. This car is like, it's like a coffin inside. It's very quiet. It's got that dual laminated glass and everything. I just didn't want to hear that shit. But these people are putting fart cans and muffler deletes on shit cars because they're so desperate for you to notice them. If they had a Honda, you wouldn't notice them. If they just had a Toyota, you wouldn't notice them. But now if they put a trumpet at the end of their goddamn muffler system, now you notice them. You're dealing with ego. You're dealing with people like, I'm listening to some of these people talk, oh yeah, I wouldn't be caught dead in a minivan. Well, listen, if I had a family and I had to do road trips, a minivan would be exactly the vehicle I would buy because it's practical. It's practical, number one. Number two, it's easy to maintain. But you have some people that are so focused on how they look in the vehicle that they don't think about practicality. And that's the reason why these people stay broke. That's the reason. Because I'll tell you what, I'm not going to name names, but there's a certain demographic that A, has a lot of children, and B, buys a lot of minivans. In fact, they keep Chrysler moving, and they also buy, and I've been noticing on the road, they buy a lot of Kia Carnivals too. I'm not going to name names. A certain demographic, that's all I'm going to say. A certain demographic seems to buy a lot of minivans. They have like 6 and 7 kids, and all of them pile into that minivan. And the woman, sometimes the wife is driving the minivan and she's in there by herself. But the bottom line is she's got that minivan because she's cranking out babies. Some of these people, they're so focused on how they look in the car and how people perceive them to look in the car. They're not focused on practicality at all. And maybe that's their right. That's their right not to focus on practicality. But the bottom line is a lot of these same people have shit credit and stay broke. And then they cry and whine when a certain demographic always seems to have money, and when that certain demographic always seems to be in charge of everything. These people whine and cry because they're always broke. They can't buy any property because their credit is screwed up. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, maybe if you made better financial decisions, instead of you driving around in that Mercedes or instead of you driving around in that BMW, maybe you should have bought real estate first. And I preach this all the time, talking about credit. It's like, you shouldn't be buying these cars if you don't have a piece of real estate or land, or if you don't have a house and you got some equity building, you shouldn't be buying these cars. But of course, people like me who try to say stuff like that, we get ignored. That's fine. You can ignore me all you want. I got 2 houses and I'm sitting in an $80,000 electric Cadillac right now. So, I mean, hey, listen, you want to ignore me, that's fine. But the same people would see me on the street and they'd be like, yeah, how did you do that? How'd you afford that? And then you try to tell them, but then they try to ignore you. So it's like, yeah, whatever. But what I do notice is that there's a certain demographic. They don't worry about what you think about them. They don't worry about how you perceive them in their vehicles. They're driving around in a minivan with 6 or 7 children, and you think they run the whole goddamn world. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name names. But that's just my observation. So the bottom line is, yeah, those same people will go out and try to buy a Durango, or they'll go out and try to buy a Jeep Grand Cherokee L or something. But then they'll be faced with higher payments, higher maintenance. And then they wonder why they're always broke. This entire company has a serious problem. They have a very serious problem. Prices are sky high. Reliability is way down low. If I spend that kind of money on a car and I come to the dealership and I put my car in for a service, I expect them to hand me a loaner. Now, Mercedes, I already know they're going to hand me a loaner. Cadillac, I already know they're going to hand me a loaner. BMW, I already know they're going to hand me a loaner. So yeah, you're paying ultimately for the higher customer service that you're going to get. So under that respect, I can understand why certain people want to go for those brands. But if you're just going for those brands just because you want to be seen in it, and you haven't really put any thought into the long-term ownership costs and all that, it's like, yeah, well, you set yourself up. Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, they have serious reliability issues. They have serious service center issues. They have serious customer service issues. When Hyundai, for example, when they decided that they were going to go up market and they were going to start selling $80,000 Hyundais, They said, no, we have to spin this off and we have to treat the customer way better than we're going to treat the regular customer who buys our regular economy car. So what they did was they spun Genesis off and they sold Genesis in affluent neighborhoods while they sold Hyundai in regular neighborhoods, because they knew that the people coming in for a regular Hyundai are going to have regular credit scores, average credit scores. They're not going to be in the top A tier. They're not going to be there. So those people go and buy Genesis. What did they do? They gave you an Equus with an iPad with the manual on it. So they give you an iPad just to get you talking about them. They gave you concierge service where people would come pick up your car and drop your car off after doing the maintenance for you. They had a whole concierge service, and they still do, built in order to make sure that owning one of their products is not a nightmare. It's not a headache. They want you to say nothing but good about their cars. Dodge, Chrysler, Fiat, Ram, Jeep. It's like when you buy one of those cars, you could spend $150,000 on one of them Dodge Demon 170s, and you get the same goddamn service that you'd get if you bought a $20,000 Jeep Cherokee. I'm not going to name names, but there are certain people who bought that Demon 170 and ended up having to sell it, or had to give it back, or had to get rid of it. That's a damn shame. Now I knew that there were problems with that car because I had heard that those cars were blowing their engines even before the car was actually unveiled. And I was like, wait a minute. If they're putting so much power into this car that it's literally destroying itself, that's probably not something you really want to buy. But these dudes, YouTube Olympics was in full swing. They ran out and bought those things. Very few of them still have them. It's just like when I think about the Trackhawk. Trackhawk, we threw the engine in there. We didn't do anything to the exterior at all, but we expect you to pay $105,000 for it. I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm going to take this money and buy another piece of property. Turned out I was right. Now, I don't know a single person who had that Trackhawk who still has that Trackhawk. And this is 5 years later? Those things came out like 2018, and nobody really bought them until about 2020 when they were trying to get rid of everything that they had on the lots. Those cars, extremely high maintenance, extremely high insurance rates, extremely high MSRP, overpriced, market adjustment pricing. Stellantis has a serious, serious problem. And I don't think that just bringing back some V8 engines is going to solve those problems. The affordability problems, the insurance affordability problems, I don't think just bringing back some V8s is going to solve those problems. So that's basically all I wanted to talk about. So this guy, Antonio Filosa, good luck to him, because he's got a lot of work ahead of him. And as far as I feel about Carlos Tavares, that dude should be in prison for what he did. He sank those brands so that he could get a bonus. And he took his money and he skipped out the door. And as far as I'm concerned, I can't buy another Stellantis product. I just can't do it. And with Trump in office imposing these tariffs, I doubt that a lot of people are going to be able to buy a Stellantis product. I think a lot of people are going to have no choice but to go to the foreign brands that are built in America, because if he does manage to somehow go through with all these ridiculous tariffs, now you're facing higher prices, market adjustment, tariff adjustment. It's ridiculous. And these people were the same ones. Oh yeah, Trump's gonna destroy the EPA. He's gonna get rid of all the emissions and all this. And then this motherfucker comes out and says, "Hey, guess what? I'm charging you 10% more, or 22% more, or if you're coming from China, I'm gonna charge you 145% more." Who could have imagined that? Who could have imagined that? But there you go. That's my rant. Like, I know some people are going to be up in their fifis about what I'm saying. And, as usual, I don't care. It's like, you can make your comments, criticisms, whatever. It's like, that's just the way I see it. But what I do know is who I write my checks to, and I know who I'm not writing my checks to. And as far as I'm concerned, Stellantis, I ain't writing my checks to them.